Hi, everybody, and welcome to Dr. Deep State. Before we continue, I want to do a little bit of a recap. And I want to remind us what we're doing here. And the idea is that we want to have a unique and special perspective on the events unfolding in the world today. And we can use the deep state to get that unique perspective. And what we've discussed so far is sort of one critical leg of understanding the deep state. And I would like to compare the deep state to a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And what we've largely discussed so far are the political and economic aspects of the history and the reality of the deep state as it operates. The best scholarly, critical material has focused upon the deep state as being a relationship between Wall Street or the global financial network and the security apparatus around Washington, D.C. And the idea that that financial sector created and functions to operate and guide the security structure and the political apparatus of the United States, and in fact, most of the democracies around the world. And one of the things that we really want to get away from here is this idea that's out there. And in fact, this is why I'm doing this, okay? This idea that came out in the news that somehow Obama left some bureaucrats in power in Washington, D.C., and President Trump is fighting with those bureaucrats. Okay, there is an actual scholarship on the deep state. The best of it, I would argue, would be the more recent international parapolitical scholarship, but there's a deep and rich scholarship. And what we find when we look at the deep state, that it's as old as the concept of the state itself. And the way we can really, truly understand it, I have submitted, is that we need to understand the concept of oligarchy, because oligarchs create Wall Street and the City of London and that financial nexus, and they are the ones that created the security apparatus and all of its offspring, including the military-industrial complex, which, as Eisenhower suggested, sure enough, has come to dominate the politics of this nation and largely the world. So through the study of oligarch, it's not a word we hear thrown out a little bit here and there, but we don't know what it is. So we got to get to that idea. And oligarchs, we've defined them as family units that pass on their influence, but they do have certain agendas. One of them is to shape the perception of those they're subject over. And we're truly looking at a point in history where we have an oligarchical class that really commands control over the whole planet. And what they do is they manage perceptions and shape perceptions. And one of the true perceptions that they shape is to give their subjects an accidental view of history. Events just sort of unfold willy-nilly. They have no rhyme or reason. They exist in a materialistic vacuum, and we really can't make any sense of them. So we go and grab on to their isms to make sense of these random events. Their scientism, their materialism, their capitalism, their liberalism, their Marxism, and on and on. And when you have this situation going on, you end up just consuming the narrative that they give you in the university system and on the telly and the rest of the media outlets. So where we finished with this idea is the actual construction of this world system. The last mechanism that needed to be completed was the actual Federalist Constitution of the United States, this ever-evolving constitution that would be the format for thinkers like Kant to create this concept of world federalism that would be realized with the Bretton Woods plan in 1944, the world system that we have today, the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Court, and so forth. So we have that system in place. And that is a product of the United States Federalist Constitution. And that was argued out in very abstract terms, something that oligarchs like to do, in order to give us the system that we have today. So that's what we have argued so far. So they've created this, and they never infiltrated the Trump way. They created this system. They work through the creation of monopolies and the corporations that surround them using usury and abstraction to make everything work. It's an ancient system, okay? And the system that we have was, it was never infiltrated. They created the corporation of the United States. Don't feel bad if you don't like this information. The whole world's been incorporated, okay? So it's not kind of like a corporation. It was literally a corporation. And again, if you want to go back and look at that information, challenge anybody to refute it. At best, the political system is a set of COs and other adjunct relationships to this corporation. So what do we do with all this? What is the point of all this? This is the kind of like spooky, shadowy, New World Order talk. Yeah, it is. I'll call it world federalism, okay? And in the schools, we call it globalism. And so that's what we're getting into. But if we just accept this happenstance, history's one damn thing after another, the narrative that we get it, we're just sort of putty in the hands of others. We don't practice our own will or force or even get to choose our own conscious perspective upon this. But once we got the idea of oligarch and how they operate, we sort of got their number. And we can start actually making decisions about what's going on. Now, the next piece of this peanut butter and jelly sandwich is going to be the jelly. And that's the esoteric perspective, the worldview that oligarchs have always held. And the important thing about this worldview, it's not sort of just to create these monopolies. It's not just sort of to create the adjunct corporations with their adjunct administrators to sort of gain control and put together this world federalism and sit back and toast one another and say, jolly good job. There's actually a worldview, an eschatological worldview that has an end game. And this worldview, if you're so beholden, you're so married to this material, naturalistic view that they've given you of the universe, this is just going to be difficult for you to understand. But I will begin to look at only the best scholarly information about esoteric, the esoteric worldview that they have always held. And where we're going with this, and what I've argued so far, the political economic infrastructure to create world federalism is not the end game in itself. We have to look at the esoteric worldview, the religion, if you will, and the eschatology, the end game, where they're going. Why did they have to have this in place? How do they think about the world? They don't do it by accident. They manufacture, they push events in order to achieve this objective. And this is what's so difficult for people to get their heads around. And what we're going to do here is look exclusively, at least for now, at the scholarly material, the stuff that has been presented at universities throughout the ages, and occasionally at some of the better institutions still is in some of the departments. So we're going to begin looking at the esoteric deep state. So thank you for joining me, and we'll continue with that. This has been Dr. Deep State.